Welcome to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk.
Hey everyone, it's Jenny Lisk, and this is episode 119 of the Widowed Parent Podcast. I had such a great discussion with Paula Harris for this episode. So Paula is a financial planner, so if you're looking for a good practical discussion on all the ins and outs of one of those topics that you may be hoping to avoid, this episode is for you. And I did talk with another financial planner recently, Stacey Francis, but we cover different topics and different aspects of this whole financial situation. So please do go ahead and listen to both episodes if you're interested in this topic. Before we jump into my discussion with Paula, a few updates from me here. So this week is, well, there's 3 days in a row. We got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And if you're listening to this right away, it should be coming out on Wednesday, which would be the 20th of July, 2022. So Monday is supposed to be my wedding anniversary. Should be number 24. I got 17 instead. So, but yeah, back in 1998, we were married. And Facebook, I still have not memorialized Dennis's Facebook profile. And I had an interesting discussion just the other day. In fact, it's going to be an episode coming up probably in August, I think, about social media, particularly grief and social media with our kids and our teens. And we talked about all kinds of good things with Adam Carter at the National Alliance for Children's Grief. And one of the things that came up is Facebook memorialization. And I have been avoiding this, maybe not for any particular reason, but a few days ago, Facebook popped up a message, hey, you have an anniversary coming up with Dennis. Don't you want to, here's some help finding him a present or a restaurant reservation or something. And I thought, all right, it's probably time to go ahead and memorialize the profile. So if you're interested in that and all things social media, be on the lookout for an episode coming up about that. And then on Tuesday should be Dennis's birthday, 51 this year. And I was just telling someone the other day, he really liked pie. And so I always try to make a pie for his birthday. And it's a nice way to remember him. And the kids and I can talk about what kind of pie we want to do and maybe make it together. But I actually just got a beautiful looking frozen pie in the mail the other day. It was sent to me as a thank you gift for an event that I did. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is perfect. I don't have time to make a pie right now, but this is like a homemade pie that was maybe par baked and then frozen. And so I threw it in the freezer and I'm going to pull it out on Tuesday and enjoy the pie, think about Dennis, and say thank you again to the people who sent me the beautiful frozen pie. And then Wednesday, we have Glioblastoma Awareness Day. And Dennis died of glioblastoma, which is a very aggressive type of brain cancer, which I had never heard of until 7 years ago. So I am not going to do probably anything in particular this year to mark the day. I want to point you to last year. I did a giveaway with Maria Quibon Whitesell, who's the author of You Can't Do It Alone, and Nora McInerney, who's the author of several books, including It's Okay to Laugh and Crying is Cool Too. And along with my book, Future Widow, we had 3 glioblastoma memoirs from 3 young widows, widowed parents, whose husbands all had died of glioblastoma. So I will point you to all 3 of those books if you're interested in learning more and seeing about the experience of a family who's been through this. And this reminds me, actually, coming up, I just met somebody who his dad died of glioblastoma when he was young, and so I'll be interviewing him soon. Haven't had that discussion yet, but that's probably going to run for Children's Grief Awareness Month. So lots and lots of things going on here. I can't wait to bring you guys some really terrific, fascinating episodes coming up in the next weeks and months. We've got a pretty full content calendar for the rest of the summer and into the fall, so keep your eyes open on Wednesdays for that. All right, that's all the news from here. Let's get on with the show. Support for this podcast comes from BetterHelp. You can talk with a licensed professional therapist online, anytime, anywhere. Visit betterhelp.com/widowedparent to learn more and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/widowedparent. I hope you'll check it out. My guest today is Paula Harris. Paula is co-founder at WH Cornerstone Investments. She is part financial advisor and part dream architect, and she takes great pride in helping her clients, particularly widowed women, obtain financial peace of mind while they get back on their feet and navigate their path forward. Paula is also the creator of Rise Up, a widow's journal. She's joining us today from Plymouth, Massachusetts. Paula, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you here, and I've been looking forward to speaking with you. And this is an important topic. We've had a couple of more practical episodes like this earlier this spring, talking about finances and Social Security and various things. And I think this will be a great addition to that series. Sometimes on the show we dive deep on grief topics, sometimes it's on parenting topics, and sometimes it's the more practical stuff of widowhood. So thank you for coming today and speaking with us.
I'm excited to contribute to the conversation.
Yeah. So let's start the discussion here. I feel like we're talking, broadly speaking, about navigating your financial life as you move forward as a solo widowed parent.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
Nope. Keep going.
So let's just start real big picture. You guys do financial advising.
Yes.
For somebody that hasn't worked with a financial advisor, like what do financial advisors do? What does that mean? Why would somebody work with a financial advisor as opposed to, I don't know, whatever they've been doing?
Sure. So like a lot of things in life, there's not one size fits all when you talk about financial advisors. So there are people who will say they're financial advisors or planners and consultants, and they may just be in the business of selling a product, which is just, sometimes that will be an insurance-based product, an annuity. There will be people who will truly, they'll invest your money, and that will be sort of how the relationship goes. And then there are people who truly just maybe do planning, or maybe they do a little bit of all of that. So really figuring out what it is someone does is hard to figure out sometimes, but really important to match your needs. Because I think when you look for someone who is a true financial advisor, finding someone who's a certified financial planner is always important because they act as a fiduciary on your behalf. We have two of those in our office, and I think that's important. So what a financial planner, someone who really can kind of dig into the details, they help you make better financial decisions. So I always like people to step back and think it's not about investing, because usually what people will come and say is like, I have some money. Actually a widower from church reached out to me and he's like, I got a little bit of money. What should I do to make it grow? And then I started to ask him all these questions, why do you want to make this money grow? Why do you want to give this to your kids? Well, I want to give my house to the kids and I want to have a pool of money for them to be able to keep the house. I said, do they even want to keep the house? So, what he wanted to find out was like what investment I should put it in. But I started to come at with all these other questions. And those questions really get to the heart of why you're doing something, what's really important, what's your time horizon, all of the things that are important. But I think as the public is trained to think it's all about an investment, because a lot of people will say, oh, I can't come to you, I don't have any money. I'm like, well, that's not what it's about. We help you keep your money, create more money, think smartly about your money. So we really dig into a lot of different things. Are you well protected? So we're going to look and say, okay, do you have the right insurance? Are you overpaying? We worked with a couple recently, and she had an insurance policy for a lapsed company that she closed 2 years ago, but she was still paying it. So we just saved her the money on that. But they were under insured on their cars and their life, like an umbrella policy. So there's often people don't know what they need to know. And so they don't start to ask any questions. But I really encourage people to think it's not about the investment, which is, I think, what the industry really is labeled as.
Yeah. Well, okay. So thank you for talking about that, because I do think that's it's easy to misunderstand that if first of all, that the discussion might be, okay, I've got this money. Am I putting it in Amazon, or am I putting it in, under the mattress, or what am I doing with it? Right.
Yeah. The coffee can in the backyard.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so it sounds like it's a pretty comprehensive and holistic set of questions that need to be thought about and things that need to be looked at.
And absolutely, and the investment piece is part of that, but it's not where you start, and it's not the main part of it typically for the way we practice financial planning and the way I think most financial planners / advisors, if you're doing it properly, you're doing it much broader than asking a bunch of questions to figure out an investment or a sale of something.
Right. Yeah, it reminds me of a lot of some people I work with, and they'll ask me a question, and half the time my answer is, it depends, right? And then I have to ask 10 different questions to be able to come up with the right, Okay, so and one of the things I'm thinking about now is when would or should or could somebody come to a financial planner? So for example, this is like, the funeral was yesterday and oh my God, I have to call a financial planner because otherwise these X, Y, and Z terrible things are going to happen? Or is this like, I'm talking to you 5 years out, or like, what do you usually see or recommend as far as when people would start those discussions?
Ideally, it is, I call it the gift of preparedness. You're, if you're a married couple or even if you're a single person, you're calling before there's what we call curveball life situation. So ideally, you've done your planning in advance so that if there is something traumatic that happens, it then just sets into a series of motions how the plan should execute.
Sure. But let's say somebody's had that curveball now, right? My listeners, their spouse has now died.
Yep.
They have some kids or some teenagers, and now they're saying, oh my God, what do I need to do? And when do I need to do it?
I would say you want to call someone pretty quickly because there are decisions that you need to make that some of them are irreversible. How you inherit your spouse's IRA is a really big decision. And you want to make sure you do that properly because there's no undoing it. So a lot of times what people will say is, well, I need to get my ducks in order and I'll get everything figured out and then I'll call you. But what we can do is help guide along the way. So, we may have seen how situations work with Social Security, here's an example. We had 2 clients widowed within 2 days. One was expected, one was unexpected. One of them we helped, the unexpected one, we helped her file her life insurance policy, and she was paid out, I'm going to say 2 to 3 weeks. It was really quick. The other one said, I'll handle it myself. And she could never get the check. And so there's an example of like, okay, if you work with someone right away, you'll get things done because one, partly we can take the emotion out of it. And 2, we know how to do things in a way that it may hold you up. We've heard people say to me, like, I got that check, but I couldn't cash it because if I cashed it, it meant he was really gone. So like, there's so much sometimes emotion brought in that what we can do is help take some of that out and help smooth the path for people. And again, those decisions, like, the people will be like, I'm going to sell the car right away. I'm going to sell the house right away. It's like, no, sit down, think about it. Don't react. And this better than I am. I'm a widow supporter rather than being a widow. You go through that grief phase where your mind is like mush and you don't even know what you were thinking for probably 6 months, 12 months, and some people even longer. And so if you're making decisions at that point and you're doing that solo, are you doing it the best way?
Well, and so this reminds me, you had mentioned before we started recording about this idea of losing your thinking partner, which is probably your spouse if you've made financial decisions together for however long.
Yep.
And now that thinking partner, I think as you called them, is gone. So then what?
So often then we will play the role of thinking partner. So it can be everything from, do you think I should sell my house? We had a woman come in recently and she said, friends invited me to go on one of these Viking river cruises. Can I afford to? Should I do it? And we're like, yes. Sometimes it's that giving the permission. Yes, you can do that. It's totally fine. It's how do I think about retirement? Like, should I retire now? Should I retire later? I don't have anyone to bounce this off of. It could be, we had a situation where husband and wife, and she has been always the one managing the money. He earned it, but he never dealt with the day-to-day stuff, which is kind of reverse of the traditional. And she was facing some major health issues. And she said, I'm afraid he will not be able to handle this money without me here. And this is a couple in their 70s. And she's like, we need to talk to you. And then she got better and she's like, okay, I'm taking over again. But, you can see where he would need the thinking partner. So, we can't always assume it's gender roles either. Because I think most families now sort of divide and conquer. One pays the bills and one does the investments often. And they often just, the other doesn't know what the other does. And when you have those big life decisions, like, what do you do? And the other thing that I can see that paralyzes a widowed parent is, how do I make decisions around the kids? And he or she is no longer here.
Let's talk about that a little bit. What do you have in mind?
So, I think families that had strong values, and it was very clearly laid out, they more clearly understand how to make those decisions going forward for the kids. But families that maybe never got to that point where they didn't really, either they didn't live their lives values based, or they hadn't maybe been together long enough to figure it out, they don't know what to do. Should they go to private school? Should they stay in public school? Coming to college, should I have them, pay some themselves, or should I be responsible 100%? Should they take loans? Should they not? Is me sending them to camp, is that something that he or she would have wanted? They want to honor their deceased spouse. And especially, if they've been fortunate to be left with a good amount of money, like, I want to spend this the best way. I don't want to be frivolous. I want to do it in a way that honors my deceased spouse. But money comes with a lot of emotions anyhow. But I think when you now, have to do this alone, and you have to do it, like, people will say, oh, sometimes he made that money, so like it doesn't feel like it's mine, so I have to be even more careful with it. I've heard that a fair amount of times.
Interesting. Yeah. So then these are some of the kinds of discussions or considerations, I guess, that a financial planner could help have those discussions, bounce things off, give some suggestions, things you haven't thought of, or things that, I don't know, or like you said, giving some answers like, can I afford that cruise?
Yep. So there, there's, and then again, different financial advisors and planners are going to work in different ways, and different clients take more advantage of that thinking partner than others, and some don't do it. I mean, we have a friend, and he passed away August of last year, and she keeps saying she's going to call. She still has yet to call. And we're like, but we can help. And the more time that goes by, the harder it gets. Yeah. And we just getting the help sooner is important. Right. And often when someone's in that widower situation, bringing a friend to go see the advisor is helpful. So you have another set of ears and eyes that helps you, remember what was said. And then also, unfortunately, there, in every industry, there's some people that maybe aren't as scrupulous. Yeah. So, you have that person that says, "Ooh, my gut's going like, yeah, I don't like that." So I think that's helpful. Well, we have a woman coming in next week, and her son-in-law is coming with her for that reason. He works in finance in another state. He's not going to manage things, but he's going to come and listen with her. I think that's important to have that trusted person with you.
That makes sense. Yeah. So this is reminding me there must be a lot of other kinds of paperwork related things. I mean, I know there are a lot of paperwork related things. I've been through this, right? Yep. I hear from people, the paperwork is just, whether it's, Social Security paperwork, financial paperwork, death certificate paperwork, I don't know, everything. I mean, I think that I know that my husband's name is still on the property tax bill, even though I retitled the house in my name only. Yep. So the county it's like the left hand doesn't talk to the right hand, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, I guess some of those things, maybe estate attorneys or people, help settle some of those things. But I'm guessing there may be paperwork along the lines of beneficiaries and policies and deeds and things and other documents. I mean, is that the kind of thing that financial planners can help with some of those things?
Absolutely. I think when I think about the most important things is updating beneficiaries. So it's it's notifying anyone. First of all, would notify any people that need to be notified, whether that be, you're getting a pension or they were getting a paycheck, and you got to notify the employer like that something has changed, because you want to make sure you have cash flow. And that's a really big deal. So first it's like, okay, get the available cash. And then making sure that, ideally you're on all bank accounts together, because you're frozen out if it's a bank account in just your spouse's name. And then you want to make sure you update your beneficiaries, because God forbid something happens to you now and you maybe have children, or you just have an estate, and then the next person has to figure it out. And probate during COVID was awful. It's probably still going to be, because the courts haven't come back in person very quickly.
Yeah. Well, let me just ask you though, you say update beneficiaries. So specifically, you're talking about like beneficiaries of life insurance policies. You're talking about beneficiaries of what kinds of things should people be like brainstorming, remembering what they have, and where do they have beneficiaries to even be changed?
Great question. Life insurance is definitely one. An annuity would be another. Your retirement plans, whether they be at the employer or at a brokerage house. So your IRAs, SEP IRAs, Roth IRAs, simple IRAs, any
401ks.
Yep, 401ks, 403bs, 457s. You want to make sure that those get updated. And then I think it's important to have secondary beneficiaries. So there's the primary, and then the contingent. So this is interesting, because this has been coming up a lot lately with single clients. They are naming one person as the primary, and in a situation where I've seen like, okay, the person never had kids, but they have siblings and they're in their late 70s. Their thought is, I'm going to name that person, and that person will be my executor, and they will then distribute my money from there. But a beneficiary form is a contract, and it says this money is now this person. So you can name 5 beneficiaries, and you can just say, you get 10%, you get 20%, or you can say you get 20, 20, 20. But the point is, whoever inherits that, it's their money. They don't have to.
They get the tax liability and stuff too.
And that's exactly it. So we've been trying to talk about this. This has come up like 3 times in the last 2 months with clients, and it's all single clients thinking that someone else will then distribute. And we're like, no, you've got to rethink that, because they have the tax liability, which is not as much of an issue maybe on a brokerage account, but it's going to be a very big issue on like an IRA or 401k, where the taxes haven't been paid yet. So that's a really big thing. So people need to think about it. So you want to update like your documents for your estate plan. So do you have a will, healthcare proxy, power of attorney? And then, that in your will or your trust, you can spell out who gets what. But that beneficiary form is a contract, and that's going to supersede what's in your will or your estate. So that's where I think people don't necessarily understand. And I suspect that if we've seen that with clients recently, that's happening all over the place. So when you name a beneficiary, that whatever you're giving them is going 100% to them. You don't want to then have them have to distribute it from there.
Well, and that's interesting and important, I think, to know that overrides with the will. I mean, like that beneficiary, even if the will says something else, that the beneficiary is the number one controller of what happens to that asset.
Absolutely. So that's really key. And so then as you update, your estate documents, like who's going to make decisions for you if you are unable to make decisions for yourself? You're having a health issue. Again, COVID was an amazing opportunity to see how these things worked when you can't go into a hospital with someone. You're in a nursing home and you can't advocate for yourself, but I can't go. So like making sure you have, people named. Okay, yeah, I can make that phone call, but if there's nobody there and no one's named, you're at the mercy of the organization, the care facility, to figure it out for you. And that's a huge burden. So you having people named ahead of time, and make sure you ask them that it's okay
to be the power of attorney or that stuff. Yeah. This is reminding me, and this is a small tangent here, but I'm just going to mention it while I'm thinking about it. You're talking about single people like me or my listeners, right, needing to make these decisions. But it's reminded me of young adult children. And it's reminded me, I'm saying this to myself as much as anyone else. I've come across recently, there's a thing called Mama Bear Legal Forms.
I have not seen that.
Yeah, I'm going to check it out. And because my son's turning 18 soon. And basically, it's a quick and easy way to get legal documents in place for your college age student, right? They're going off to college in another state. Yep. You've been making medical decisions or had ability to get answers, and now they're 18 and all of a sudden you don't have that. And it seems to be a very cool, I've seen it in some parenting groups and stuff. So listeners, I'm going to try it myself and then I will report back to you guys and get that set up and try to set up some kind of special link or something, because it seems to be a very quick and inexpensive and easy way for people to get their new 18-year-olds or older, set up with those documents. So I'm glad we're talking about this because that reminded me.
Which is great, because now people are preparing to go off to college, like their kids, and especially for the first time. And that's a big deal. Yeah. And my sense, I don't have children myself, but my sense is that parents are much more involved in their kids' lives than when maybe I was growing up. And they expect to be able to get those answers and talk to the doctor until the child's 25 or something.
Right.
It's not the case.
And the 18-year-old may not know how to answer some of these questions themselves. They may not have all their relevant family medical history or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Because 18-year-olds aren't used to doing that either, because their parent has probably been doing it for them.
Right.
So, yeah, okay, good. This is an important tangent. I'm going to make a little mental note after we get off this to go and get that set up. And I'll report back to all you guys about that, because I do think that's important for us to, make sure our kids' legal documents are in order. Anyway, let's get back to our discussion here. Sure. So let's see. Did we cover that one pretty thoroughly? Beneficiaries, ownership changes, bank accounts, things like that. Are there some other? You mentioned
the major ones. I mean, and then car titles, other property. Those, I think you probably have less of an urgency to do that. I think one of the things is notifying. When do you notify, the motor vehicles registry that person's no longer alive? Because then the license is gone.
I mean the driver's license or the car license?
The driver's license. You start to notify a whole bunch of people, and you got to have your ducks in a row, because you can get shut off of a lot of things that you may have been able to access. So you just want to make sure you do things in the right way, because everything seems to talk to each other these days.
Yeah. Now I'm sitting here wondering if I was supposed to have notified the Department of Motor Vehicles. I mean, I of course did the car registrations, but those are assets. But I mean, as far as like his driver's license, I don't think I ever notified anybody. Yeah. I don't know if I was supposed to. Maybe I was. I guess they figured it out by now, because it's been 6+ years.
Right. But it's a good thing to make sure that nobody tries to get a license in that person's name again.
Yeah, that's true.
Unfortunately, there's not a lot. There are unscrupulous people that take advantage of these situations, which is unfortunate. Can we go on a quick tangent here?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's another thing that I think is important for all ages, and it's called the File of Life card. I don't know if you've come across that. It's a red card, and in big white letters it says File of Life. And I used to give it out to my older clients. And then we had a situation where our neighbor died. He was in his 80s, no children, no real direct family. And he died in his house. Unfortunately, it was a couple of days there. And then when all the medical people come, who do they call? Who's his doctor? Like all those types of things. And these cards have all that information. Who do you call? Here's my insurance. This is my doctor's name. These are any medications that I'm on. And so as I talked to the police officer that day, he said, oh my gosh, we want everyone to have one of these. Because even if a teenager's in a car accident or they have a seizure on we don't know what's happening, but if I can go into a wallet or a pocketbook and I can find a File of Life card, I may have more clues as to what might be happening. Person. So we have actually taken the opportunity to send it to all of our clients, all age groups, ones with kids and everything. And another thing, when you're sending your college age kids off, would they bring that with them? Put it in their wallet or their pocketbook. In someone's home, ideally it hangs on the refrigerator. There's 2 sizes. And so you'd have it hang on the refrigerator so that if the medical people had to come in, they know they're trained to look for it there. So that's another
So what's it called again?
File of Life.
And is that something you can Google or find somewhere?
You can Google it. I think it's fol.org.
Okay.
And you can get them free. I think you can get one free from them. You can get, often senior centers have them, fire departments have them, and they're just a great thing to fill out. And that would be something, if you have filled it out, to make sure that you refill it out if if your spouse has passed away, so that you have the correct information in there. So I've done it this year. I've made my parents do it. So it's just, I think, another good thing to be protected.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And I will find the link to that and put it in the show notes as well for the listeners to find that and check that out. So this now is reminding me, speaking of being prepared with this information in your pocket or on your refrigerator. Yeah. I think there's some other preparedness topics I've heard you talk about. I think you call it the soft side of estate planning. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. There's, I call it the gift of preparedness. It's having those hard conversations. So there's something called 5 Wishes. There's another organization called the Conversation Project, if you've come across any of these. But they are to help you think through, at the end of your life, how it is you want to be treated. What do you want to have happen during that care process? And then what happens at end of life? And I don't think most people want to talk about it. I mean, I try to even get people to talk about putting an estate plan in place, let alone talk about like true end of life. But we literally are born to die. I mean, that's our whole life, is to get to the point where we die. And as a society, I think, especially in our American culture, we are very uncomfortable to talk about things like this. But I think that, having the conversations in a time when hopefully, things, you're healthy and you're at a good time, a mindset. It's like, when you die, what do you want to happen to your body? We had a family member pass away recently, and there have been multiple marriages, and there's different kids from different marriages, and like the kids want one thing to have happen, the current wife wants one thing to have happen. It's like, how do you raised in a certain faith tradition, so there's that kind of influences, but you're not really practicing in it. And it was stressful. Like, who steps in to say, okay, who makes the final decisions?
Right.
And because none of these things were ever discussed. And so that it comes down to, okay, you've been through this. This was the first closest I've ever been through it, going to the funeral home and the decisions you have to make.
Yeah.
What type of casket? Is it an open casket? Is there a wake? If there's a wake, is it open casket? Is it cremation? Is there a funeral? Is there a mass? Is there a celebration of life? How much do you want to spend? Like, do you want flowers, or you want things to go to a charity? What charity?
What kind of flowers?
Yeah. It's like, there's all of that. That's very, during a very short period of time, like a day or two.
Very stressful and emotionally impossible time.
Right. And if you've never talked about these things, it makes it even harder to decide what to do. And you, the decision maker, is like, you're holding it together. Right. And like, this is stressful, and you're trying to honor all these different people. And like in this case, you're honoring the parents too, like of this deceased person that I'm talking about. So what do they want? And then where do they get buried traditionally? Are their ashes spread? Like a lot of emotion comes in on all of that. So that's one aspect of the discussions. But the other is like, okay, there's an illness, and how do you want to live those last days, weeks, months, years? And there's another great book, which is written by Atul Gawande. And I'm Being Mortal. Yes. That book totally changed. I think everyone should be required to read that book. He was a doctor, and doctors are trained to save lives at all costs, and always find another solution to save lives. But at some point, that's not really practical. And that's not also realistic. And I think sometimes people, they live in that state of hope, which I think is really important, but they don't actually make plans for what may happen. And a lot of times I've heard people say, like, well, if we actually talked about the possibility of my loved one dying, that would jinx us. That would mean it would happen. Like, I didn't want to take away their hope. But again, as I said earlier, reality is we are all born to die. So if we can ideally have these conversations before we're sick, it's just so much more powerful. And then it really becomes about quality of life. And I think one of the neat things about palliative care is it teaches people how to have quality of life each day. And ideally, we all should think that way. So palliative care and hospice are a really important part of that softer side of estate planning.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned palliative care. And if listeners haven't heard that word before, I'll refer you back to my interview with Dr. BJ Miller, where we did a really good deep dive on palliative care, what it is, how it's different than hospice, how it's similar, like all that stuff. And I think that is worth listening to because he had a lot of good insights on that. And I'm thinking, as you were speaking, I was thinking, my listeners probably have some opinions on this soft side of estate planning or preparedness based on, their experiences with their late spouses, either having said what their wishes were or having not said what their wishes were, and how that went for them, and whether, they did explain their wishes and they were relieved, or whether they didn't and it was added stress, or vice versa, everything. I'm thinking that, so I think it's important, like you say, to now then go to the next level for ourselves and think about what do we want for ourselves now. We've been through this with our spouses. Maybe now, I know before my husband died, I was like, I don't want to think about it. Do I want to be cremated or not? I don't know. But now I'm like, oh my God, well, all right, things can happen. So I guess I better think about it.
And you probably have much more defined opinions now.
Yeah. Being through it once, not obviously as the person themselves who was ill, but, being obviously very closely connected.
Right. And I've tried to leverage this with my parents. My mother was having a hip replacement, and I was like, okay, I've been trying to talk about this for a long time. We're talking about it now. My father's been trying to decide for years, should I be buried in the National Cemetery, or should I just be buried in the town we live in? I can't decide. And I finally got him to decide. Right. And it's like, okay, well, we're on this roll. Church, funeral, and so like they gave me some direction that at least now I can, if something happens, I can get them rolling. Now I have to get them to buy the plots.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, this also reminds me when my husband died, we were talking about, all the millions of things that have to be done to plan the funeral and everything. And my mother remembered that he had listed some funeral songs. He had suggested, a friend had asked for funeral song recommendations for her husband's funeral a few years back.
Yep.
And somehow it got to my husband to say, hey, you know about this. What do you think? And he actually wrote an email that said, here's what I suggest. And then he added, by the way, and this is super sad, but if anything happens to me, I'd want these songs too. And I forgot about it. Right?
Yeah.
It's been a few years before, and he wasn't sick. It was way before anything. But my mom was like, remember that? Maybe you can find that email. And I found it. And I'm like, wow. And so then it was like 5 more decisions off my plate, because it's like, you have to pick 4 or 5 songs, whatever, for mass. Right. Yep. And I'm like, okay, that's off my plate. Now I can worry about the next thing. Right.
Like, I mean, that's the gift.
Yeah, it was a gift. And there was no need for any family members to have any disagreements about what songs would be appropriate, because it was like, he said, these are the songs that I would want. And we're all like, oh, those are the songs he wants. Great. Move on.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's just so important. And people who say, oh, I don't care. Please still make some type of decision, because it just puts so much stress on the person who's left behind. Like you said, like that was 5 things you didn't have to decide at that point.
Right.
So I think that's really important. And then it's like, do you want to stay at home? Do you want to die at home? Do you want to die in a hospital? Do you want to die at a hospice home? And those types of decisions matter a lot too. Do you want 24-hour care with you? Do you want to be left alone when you die? Some people will not die unless they're alone. But we as people feel like, do not leave them. We have to be there. But some people, would prefer that, not to have that. Do you want music playing? What do you want to eat? Do you not want to eat? Like all those types of things that just are helpful to talk about. And those resources like 5 Wishes and Conversation Project have those tools to sort of walk you through that.
Okay. All right, good. Well, thank you for sharing those. I'll find those links and put them in the show notes too, so that people can start to think about some of those discussions and start to at least do some thinking of what they might want.
And then write it down.
And write it down.
Write it
yes.
down.
Right. Step 1, think about it. Step 2, write it down. Yes.
Send in an email to someone who'll remember.
That's right. That's right. And then you got to search through your emails for thousands of emails I get. But anyway, okay. Well, let's shift gears a little bit here before we close up, because I know you also have a journal for widowed people. So can you tell us about that?
Sure. I wrote a journal called Rise Up, a widow's journal, and it's a place to gather and reflect on the journey. And it's broken into 10 chapters, sort of along the grief, what I would say, time frame. So, from finding out you're suddenly single to sort of like, oh my gosh, grief has no time frame, to love and wisdom and faith and moving forward. And there's 20 inspirational quotes to get you to think about something and then journal on it. And then there's also some writing prompts, and it can be used, in order. It can be used, you just open a page and that's what you feel. And I think it's a great gift when someone first passes away. But I would say up to about maybe 2 years, depending on the person's grief journey. Some people 10 years later, and it could still be helpful. And it's been really, really well received. It's been very comforting for people. I think when you take things out of your head, because I think things swirl in our head so often, and we put it on paper, it releases it. And there's sometimes it's a lot of sadness, sometimes it's anger, frustration. At different times, I think the journey takes you on different emotions too. And I think for me, I really designed it. It's this Rise Up theme that I use a lot with my retreats. And I want people to think of hope in the future. And it's got spring-like colors, sort of the thought of rebirth. And it finishes with, moving forward and being on your own. And because each of us is still meant to live a wonderful and brilliant life. It's just going to look different. And I'm a fairly positive person, and I've done a lot of self-work. And I think it's been the culmination of a lot of that and working with widows in our practice. And, it's been really an awesome journey to put this in the world and see how it's being received.
Terrific. Yeah, I know a lot of people like journaling as a tool, I guess, for lack of a better word, for grief and for thinking about their grief or getting some of it on paper or like you said, different things. So good. So I'll put a link to that then in the show notes. Again, it's called Rise Up, a Widow's Journal. Yep.
And one thing, I left the pages blank. And some people are like, no, journal has to have lines. But I didn't feel like it should have lines, because some days you may want to draw. You may want to doodle.
Yeah.
So it may not be about words. It may be about, it might just be, you might just take the color blue and just scribble. I mean, like whatever, it's meant to use it in different ways for different people. And I didn't want to conform people.
Sure. And so on the pages then, I think there are quotes on the different pages. Did you have a favorite one you could share with us?
Oh, that's a good point. I hadn't pulled that up, but there's one that I love. Oh gosh, it's getting, I don't know if I'll find it fast enough, but you kind of get to the edge and then someone pushes you, and instead of falling, you fly. And I kind of, and that's not the right wording, but it's that image, Oh, here it. I think actually I did just find it.
Now, listeners can't see you. You're flipping through your book. You've got sticky notes on all the pages, well marked up.
Yep. Come to the edge, he said. They said, we are afraid. Come to the edge, he said again. They came. He pushed them, and they flew. And that's towards the end of the journal. And I think that sometimes we live in that fear, and we need that encouragement to go and move forward. And most people, I think, will find they will fly. And I just loved that symbolism. Again, I live in positivity and hope. So I think that one strikes me.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And so again, each page has a different quote, and which might prompt someone's thinking or reflections based on the theme and contents of each quote.
Yep. And I'm working on a general grief one as well, so that it could be used for loss of any spouse or child or parent. Some people are like, you could probably even use it for job loss or so I'm trying to keep it a pretty general grief reflection journal. So
Gotcha.
that's my project for the summer. Yes,
I suppose that with all of the increased amount of grief we have today in the world and in our country, sadly, there's a bigger need than ever for something like that.
I think you're right. So hopefully it will bring again hope to people.
Yeah. Good. All right. Well, gosh, I think that's actually a great place to wrap up. I think we've covered a lot of good ground here. I like to ask one wrap-up question of my guests. If you could say one thing to widowed parents about navigating their new financial lives, what would you say to them?
I think it's important to not put your head in the sand and pretend like you either can't handle the financial piece, you don't want to, or you're all set. I think it's always come from a place of knowledge rather than fear, and seek out that thought partner, thinking partner, the advisor. Professionals will help shorten the journey for you, whether it be on the financial side or the legal side. But I think it's important to deal in reality rather than just ignoring a situation. So find some help.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I think that's a great place to end. So my guest today is Paula Harris, who is co-founder at WH Cornerstone Investments. So Paula, where can listeners find you and find your journal if they'd like to learn more about your work?
Sure. The journal is easily found on Amazon, and our website is whcornerstone.com.
Okay. Terrific. Well, Paula, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you, Jenny. I really enjoyed it.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Paula Harris as much as I did. You can find show notes and all the links at widowedparentpodcast.com. Look for episode 119. And shout out today to my listeners in and around Boston in honor of today's guest. I'm happy to share that we have listeners in all 50 states and in 88 different countries. So wherever you are, welcome. I hope you're finding some of the support that you need. If you're finding the Widowed Parent Podcast helpful, please consider supporting the show. You can do that at buymeacoffee.com/widowedparent. That's buymeacoffee.com/widowedparent. As always, thank you for listening, and until next week, remember, you've got this.
Thank you for listening to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk. Connect with us on social media and at widowedparentpodcast.com.